Information-fueled.
Opinion-driven.
This is Nashville's Morning News with Dan Mandis.
And so, my fellow Americans,
we talk news.
6:07, Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Welcome on into your Monday. Feels like a Monday. It is April 28th of 2025, and hope you are doing well. There is a lot of news, and by the way, James Carafano is going to be joining us at 6:38 here on Nashville's Morning News to talk about all things China, all things Ukraine and Russia. There is a lot going on. Iconic photo of Donald Trump and Vladimir Zelensky. He is there at the Pope's funeral. And I thought it was interesting. They're in this massive room. Maybe you've seen it. They're in this massive room, and there is Trump and Zelensky, and there's two chairs, no other furniture around, and they're just sitting there, basically knee to knee talking. And they're trying to hammer out some sort of a deal. It was a huge picture over the weekend. And for a lot of folks, they assumed that part of what is going on is Trump is using the Pope's funeral as an opportunity to just get with Zelensky. Last time these two had spoken, at least in person, was that rather ill-fated White House meeting where you had Marco Rubio and you had J.D. Vance and Trump and Zelensky when they all got into that fight. And so this was the first time that the two had spoken. Now, you had a lot going on. And now we all know the lead up to what was going on between Zelensky and Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump. Trump last week was basically calling out Zelensky and saying that he didn't want to stop the war. I want to play some audio for you.
How iconic. That setting, that scene, that meeting is going to go down in the history books for President Trump to be a president of peace, to be talking peace and diplomacy in the Vatican of all places.
Yeah, everybody was talking about this photograph. Now, this was a sign, at least to me, I'm looking at this, and I think this was a sign to Vladimir Putin that Donald Trump isn't above sitting down one-on-one. And I think that Putin saw this, and it probably for Putin was a little alarming because he knows that right now, or at least up until this photo, that really Trump was talking about how Putin was the one that really wanted peace and Zelensky was the guy in the way. Now, remember what I said last week, which was what is really going on is that Putin simply will not, he's demanding things that can never be agreed to. And Zelensky is the one that is more vocal about his displeasure at how these negotiations are going. But, you know, Putin is just sitting back and he says, well, I'm not going to agree to give up any land. I'm not going to agree to be sent to a criminal court. These are all things that Zelensky is demanding. And so Putin has just been bombing away, and that's been ticking off not only Zelensky, but also Donald Trump. And so Trump sits down with Zelensky, and they had this one-on-one conversation. And this photograph, iconic, a lot of people saying. Trump has been blasting Zelensky for blowing up any deal by saying the terms were all non-starters. It feels like now the tables have turned. And Trump posted over the weekend, it is Russia who does not want a deal. So the tables have turned. And we know that Donald Trump, you know, his alliances can change with, in a nanosecond. So now he was asked when he got back home about that meeting and his message to Vladimir Putin. This is what Donald Trump had to say.
well, I wanted to stop shooting, sit down, and sign a deal. We have the confines of the deal, I believe, and I wanted to sign it and be done with it and just go back to life.
Yeah, remember one of the big stories out, this was Friday, was about how Donald Trump had been frustrated over the lack of progress, the lack of a deal, the lack of either side willing to negotiate. And when you look at what both sides are demanding, there really is, it doesn't feel like anyway, that there is any real middle ground. And so there's a long way to go. Donald Trump obviously wants peace.
Both sides have to want that. He's expressed his frustration with both sides, but yet his determination. And if you go back to, we're 100 days in, just 100 days ago, Biden and his team had no end in sight. This was an endless war. This was a meat grinder of men and material and national treasure that really he had never defined victory. And President Trump is determined to use diplomacy to bring this war to an end, to talk to both sides. And just in 100 days, we've had multiple rounds.
By the way, that was with Maria Bartiromo. Michael Waltz, Trump's national security advisor, and he is right in the mix. And so, yes, Vladimir Putin had been bombing civilian areas in Ukraine. Trump posting on Truth Social that he thought Putin might be stringing him along. This is what Trump wrote on Truth Social. I'm trying to just clean up the mess that was left to me by Obama and Biden, and what a mess it is. With all of that being said, there was no reason for Vladimir Putin to be shooting missiles into these civilian areas, cities and towns over the last few days, which we've been reporting that. It makes me think that maybe Putin doesn't want to stop this war. He's just, he says, tapping me along, stringing me along, and has to be dealt with differently. Though banking, he says, through banking or secondary sanctions. Too many people are dying. So Trump now believes that Vladimir Putin maybe, I know that I've spoken about, we've all talked about this, about how Putin, it feels like he has been stringing Trump along because, as I said on Friday, there are things going on that Putin is demanding things that Zelensky simply will not agree to, and Zelensky is demanding things that Putin will never agree to. But again, Zelensky is the one that has been more vocal about it, and that has been raising the ire of Donald Trump, who was asked about Crimea over the weekend.
Is Zelensky ready to give up Crimea, do you think, Mr. President? Oh, I think so, yeah. Look, Crimea was 12 years ago. That was President Obama. They gave it up without a shot being fired. So don't talk to me about Crimea. Talk to Obama and Biden about Crimea.
Yeah, the president also said Zelensky asked for more weapons. And Trump said, we'll see what happens with respect to Russia. I can't imagine Trump would approve more weapons or more money going to Ukraine. I mean, I understand if we're close to a deal, then I would understand, okay, we're going to get through the next month. Here's some weaponry for the next month. But that would be a complete U-turn from what Donald Trump has been saying really since this war began, which is no more weapons and no more money for Ukraine. And now Zelensky in this, knee-to-knee meeting with Donald Trump, Trump is saying that he was asking for more weaponry. And again, Trump is saying we'll see what happens with respect to Russia. By the way, Waltz also says that Ukraine mineral deal, remember that whole minerals deal that we had with Ukraine, is going to get done as well. Marco Rubio was interviewed by Kirsten Welker over the weekend, and he talked about possible sanctions against Russia. And what Rubio said was actually pretty poignant. We're going to talk about that and a whole lot more straight ahead. It is 6:15. Time to check the roads on WTN. 16, Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. As far as your weather for today, it's going to be 88 degrees and partly cloudy. We do have thunderstorms expected through Thursday. And so you want to stay close for your complete forecast coming up at 6:30 here on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. So everybody wants to know, are we close to a deal with Vladimir Putin and Zelensky? I don't believe that we are. We'll see what James Carafano has to say here coming up. But Marco Rubio, of course, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, he was on with Kirsten Welker over the weekend, and people are asking. And Welker asked about sanctions against Russia because, as Donald Trump says, maybe what we need to do in dealing with Russia is to implement sanctions. Now, remember that it was Biden who tried to implement and did implement sanctions against Russia, but they were really, really weak sanctions. And so now, at this point, should we even bother to implement sanctions if we do against Russia, because they keep bombing Ukraine and Trump doesn't feel like they are negotiating in good faith. And so now the pressure's on President Trump to start sanctioning Russia. This is what Marco Rubio had to say about that. And this was over the weekend.
Given the frustrations that he is voicing, Mr. Secretary, why hasn't he imposed sanctions yet?
Well, because I think we're still hoping to see that this effort works out in diplomacy and that we can bring these two sides closer together. I mean, the minute you start doing that kind of stuff, you're walking away from it. You've now doomed yourself to another 2 years of war, and we don't want to see it happen. I think what's important and really ways is there is no other country, there is no other institution or organization on the earth that can bring these two sides together. No one else is talking to both sides but us, and no one else in the world can make something like this happen but the president. This is a very significant responsibility and a really important opportunity, and we want to make sure that we work it all the way through, that we don't walk away from something that can actually work or that can actually lead to peace, but we also don't want to continue to spend time on something that's not going to get us there. So throughout this process, it's about determining, do both sides really want peace, and how close are they or how far apart they are after 90 days of effort here, over 90 days of effort. That's what we're trying to determine this week. There are reasons to be optimistic, and there are also reasons to be concerned. It's complicated. If this was an easy war to end, it would have been ended by someone else a long time ago. But right now, the only one who can bring these two sides together to end this war is our president, President Trump. And we're doing everything we can to see if we can get that done here over the next few days.
All right, so we'll have to see what happens with this. I hope that I'm wrong. I truly hope that I'm wrong. I just don't see anything happening here in the next couple of months. But again, with Trump, you never know. By the way, other news, just very quickly, headline from CNN. We talked about this on Friday as far as the tariffs goes. China is still out there saying, we have not spoken to Donald Trump or his team. Trump and his team are saying, yes, we are having conversations with China. It's kind of surprising. And I've got some audio from Scott Bessent on all this, Treasury Secretary. He was on all the talk shows over the weekend. But the question about China and what do we do about China? I was hearing Jay talk about the futures in the previous newscast. The futures, it looks like they're down today. We may, who knows, have a tough day on Wall Street today. But that's one of the big questions. Okay, so are we or are we not talking about tariffs and negotiating with China? Yes or no? Trump's team says we are. China says we're not. But I really liked what Scott Bessent had to say about the tariffs and where we are with all of these negotiations. I've got that story for you and a whole lot more straight ahead. It is Nashville's Morning News for a Monday on Super Talk 99.7. Jay Harper's in the WTN Newsroom. Jay, what's coming up at 6:30?
Yes, sir, Dan. A hit and run off the waters off the Florida coast. We'll have the latest. Also, potentially good news for home buyers. And a would-be robber messed with the wrong Nashville store. We'll have those stories for you at the bottom of the hour on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.